want to start? Or you can have Chief?
Yeah, Chief,
Chief.
Aaron, Deputy Chief, you want to sit up here, or do you want to stand up there?
Whatever you think is easier.
It's up to you.
I can stand here. I brought up paper copies so I can stand. Aaron, can you hold your chair? I brought backup. Okay. Should have a slideshow there for you all. Should have printed it in bigger. Yikes. Okay. Thank you for allowing us to do this tonight. I think it's very important for the community to hear what's been going on, kind of at a glance with the police department in FY '25, talk about some budgetary issues and some things that we're planning on for FY '26. So thank you for giving me the time. But before I start, because I really don't want it to get lost and I don't want to forget and I want to be sensitive to everybody's time, but I really want to thank the women and the men of the Stoneham Police Department for their efforts this year. It's a challenging time. Budgets are very challenging. We're doing more with less, and it's not unique to Stoneham. It's in every community, in every chief that I talk to. But I don't want to lose sight of the fact of the work that the women and men of this department do for our community day in and day out, and that goes for everyone. The officers out there tonight on this freezing cold night at the accident on Main Street, standing out there for an hour. To our frontline personnel, our dispatchers, and the people that work behind the scenes, investigating crimes, and people that work on budgets like Erin, and people that are mental health professionals, so that are sworn and non-sworn. So I just want to say thank you all for doing what you do. You make us all look good, and I really, really appreciate the work, and I look forward to next year. So thank you. So with that said, this is our presentation to our select board on the 7th, and again, the one person that has really made a big difference in doing this is Erin Sinclair. She is behind the scenes running the internal makeup of our police department. She is with me day in, day out, overseeing the budget. She makes magic happen when we need it to happen. When we're short on money to do a movie night, we just basically, Erin, make it happen. And somehow she makes it happen, and really, the work that she puts into our police department to keep things running is it's remarkable. And it doesn't happen in every police department, I can tell you that. So, Erin, thank you for all the work you do. Our year in review, I'm just going to go over some of the big points that we did. So this year we had 4 officers and 1 civilian leave the department. We had two resignations. I'm sorry, I have to put my back to you all. We had 2 resignations and 2 retirements. 2 retirements for sworn officers, and 1 was our domestic violence advocate, Linda Lease, who was in here a few months ago. And in FY '25, we also hired 7 police officers, 5 new recruits, 2 of which you met tonight. The others will be starting the police academy in 2 weeks. We also hired 1 was a rehire that we stole from Chief Grafton from the fire department. That officer came already academy trained, so that's a huge benefit and a huge cost savings to the police department. And Kevin Enriquez, who you met tonight, also came academy trained, so that is a big cost savings for us as well. And we also replaced Linda with a new domestic violence advocate who's already off and running in a seamless transition. We promoted 1 officer to the rank of sergeant, Emily Del Russo, who replaced Sergeant Rotundi, who just retired. And 1 new position that we created this year that I know from my experience will have an enormous benefit and impact to Stoneham and the police department is we assigned a detective to the FBI Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force, and the acronym is OCDF. It took me a while to put that in my head. But so what that is that's a team of the FBI and all the federal agencies. They run their special operations units with task force officers. Those officers are state and local police officers. They're sworn in as federal agents. They essentially work directly for the FBI, this detective does, although he does report to us as well. His area of responsibility is New England, and they specifically target high drug trafficking organizations that are sometimes international. They travel internationally to investigate. And they also, money laundering, very, very high-level money laundering operations. Why do we do that? And I should say, there's only 9 spots in New England for local police departments. And so we compete with a lot of people to get a person there, and we were lucky enough to get a Stoneham officer in there. What that does for Stoneham is it really strengthens our relationship with the federal government, with the FBI. It cuts out all the red tape. If we need the FBI for anything, it's literally, we have an officer that works for them. It's a phone call for anything. It also, it's my belief and my experience that, if we have an officer targeting that international and that high-level drugs, it's a trickle-down effect locally. So we will see an impact on that. And also a huge benefit to us as a department and our budget is when they make a seizure, we get a percentage of their seizure. So asset forfeiture, so money from bad guys, we get a portion of that. With that said, the fruits of the labor take a while. Asset forfeiture is a long, drawn-out process because there's courts and appeals, and everyone has their right to be heard. So we will see fruits of the labor. It will take a few years to see that, but that will help our budget where we have shortfalls in years to come. It will cover anything training and equipment-wise that the budget won't cover. There are very strict guidelines. But I thought that was a really important position to add to the department, and we're off and running with that. And the detective is doing a great job. We participated in our national night out, which was a great success in the summer. We had our first SPD movie night on the Common once school got out. We did that. We had about 350 students there and families, which I thought was fantastic. And then Coffee with a Cop events at Target. We participated, which was one of my favorite days, in our second annual Special Olympics softball game. That was just a great event. And the Stoneham Spartans, I think I'm conservative when I say they beat us and my fellow counterparts here. Our team's 15-0. I think that's being very, very conservative. But as I move through this presentation, things like that for our community, there's a cost to that, unfortunately. And as we talk about budgets, it's important to keep in mind that when some of our asks are lined up with that, so we can provide these services and that connection and transparency to the community that they deserve. So just please keep that in mind as I move through the presentation. The other thing we did that I thought was very important with the department, as I look at the department over the last year and a half, we needed to create an administrative services division, so we added a new division to make 4 divisions with the department: our patrol, our investigative division, our dispatch operations, and now we have an administrative services division. Dave Thistle heads up that division. So what that division does, it oversees all training, it oversees all policy and policy development, it oversees our accreditation and certification process. So that was one thing that we didn't have, and I thought would be just from my experience, would be very, very beneficial. It streamlines operations. It gives people appropriate reporting responsibilities, puts a little oversight on things that we didn't have in place before. So that is in place now. We have a new organizational chart on our website, and please take a peek at it. We also enhanced and revitalized our background investigation process, which is which is super important when we hire someone. We look at it, the responsibility. It's an investment for you all. It's an investment for us, investment for the town. It's a 35-year investment, so we want to get it right from the get-go. So we took our background process, we broke it down, and we really, really made it a lot more comprehensive. We dig in a little bit deeper than we were doing. We want to get that right candidate. As you saw tonight, those are 2 direct benefits of that new process. So that was another important thing. And then I'm going to pass this around. David, you're the first person outside the police department to hold our new body-worn cameras. Excuse me. I'll get into the funding for that in a minute, but we are in the process of implementing body-worn cameras, and that includes the role of a body-worn camera supervisor, someone to oversee that program. So you will see, hopefully, as we move towards March, all of our officers will be wearing body-worn cameras. It's something kind of new toward in the policing world, especially in Massachusetts, but I would be remiss if I didn't say I want to compliment both police unions for getting this done. There was a contract agreement prior to me getting here, but we still had to develop policy. This is a new thing, and change is hard, especially when you're wearing a camera 8 hours of your 8-hour shift. So it's a new thing, but I just want to compliment the professionalism of both police unions and both police union presidents for working with the town prior to me and working with the old chief and me as the new chief to get this done. It's a huge benefit to the community, to our profession. It speaks towards accountability and transparency, and that's what we want from our officers in our community. The next slide is, excuse me, this is our calls for service for the year. It's a 3-year comparison from 22 to 24. I mean, I can barely, I'm sorry. So in 24, we had, I'm gonna estimate about 18,600 calls for service. That's about a 6% increase from 22. So we are seeing the trend go up a little bit, and that's, again, towards more housing, more needs of the community. It speaks to, we need more officers. It's a 6% increase. I don't suspect that to go down with all the development going on, which is not a bad thing. So that's just at a glance, a 3-year comparison. Again, we're up about 6% from 22 to 23, and that's our officers handling almost 19,000 calls, emergency and non-emergency calls a year. The next slide. So this is 2024 FBI major crimes or Part 1 crimes. Just briefly, a Part 1 crime is what the FBI says plagues society the most. Not necessarily Stoneham, because they don't, but this is what they say nationwide. So our numbers are really consistent. There's a 3-year comparison, 22 to 24. I know, I apologize, I know it's difficult to see, but the categories are homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson.
Chief.
Those are the Part 1, what the FBI says plagues society the most.
Excuse me, Chief.
Yes, sir.
Is mental health in there?
Next, it's
Oh,
on a
sorry.
slide, yeah.
Sorry.
So mental health isn't part of that Part 1 FBI category. The next slide is, these are more common calls and statistics that we deal with here in Stoneham, day in and day out. And the categories, I'm sorry, George, the next slide is mental health.
Sorry.
These are the number of arrests we had. Any way to move that to the left just a little bit? Yeah, there we go. So it's a 3-year comparison for arrests. Last year we had 82 arrests in 24. Pretty consistent, almost identical to the year before, and very consistent with 22. Our criminal summonses, it's a criminal charge where someone has to go to court. They just don't get the handcuffs put on them. They still have to go to court. They're charged with a crime. Again, very, very consistent. Domestic violence, we had 126 incidents we responded to last year. And, the one I do want to point out is the building person checks. It does seem mundane, but I will tell you, I think I put that in there because it shows that, and I can tell you from my experience, anywhere in the country, midnight to 8 is quiet in the police world. I was a Baltimore City police officer early in my career, and it's quiet in Baltimore City, midnight to 8. Not as quiet as Stoneham, but it's quiet. But I will tell you, so the majority of those numbers, it doesn't mean our officers aren't doing anything. They're out there being proactive. They check our town buildings. They're checking our schools. They're checking our businesses. They call the checks in to ensure accountability that they're doing that, and we log it in our computer system. So that's what they're doing, mostly during the overnight hours when it's quiet. George, I'm sorry. This is our drug and overdose. This is a very important slide to us and to our CIT team. There's a lot of unfortunate numbers on this screen, but with that said, I think our CIT team and our officers, and our fire department and Armstrong Ambulance do a fantastic job dealing with mental health related calls, drug overdoses. So the drug overdoses, obviously, they're exactly the same in the last 2 years and very consistent with the year before. Out of those overdoses, last year, the 19 number, 15 of those were residents of Stoneham, and 4 were non-residents or visitors just passing through. The average age of our overdose patients last year was 45. And in the very unfortunate category of our overdose fatalities, we had 3 unfortunate incidents last year. 2 of those were our own residents. 1 of those was not a resident of Stoneham. And the average age of the overdose fatality was 49 years old. Our mental health related calls, you can see that is up slightly from the 2 previous years. You know, and I do it, it's hard to put your finger on why, because everybody has different things in their life going on. But I think that the climate of the world certainly plays a factor in that. It was a tumultuous year on many fronts. And I think that happens, and we're coming off COVID, and folks are getting used to life back in the fast lane, I guess. So it's that's my estimation as to why that number is there. And then our CIT, a crisis intervention team follow-up. These are the numbers, again, very consistent. And I know it does seem like there's a little bit of a shortfall, but please keep in mind, like, a lot of folks seek their own treatment, a lot of folks refuse treatment. And that number doesn't include follow-ups with family members. Those are follow-ups with our patients. Sometimes the patients don't want to talk to us, so we connect with their family members. But everyone that's involved in a mental health, a drug-related call, is our CIT team is on it. They follow up with them. They get them the resources if they're willing to accept them, and hopefully get them on a right path. This is a favorite slide of most, our grant funding. You know, grant funding is super important to police, and I'm sure fire department, DPW as well. There's a lot of things we would not be able to do without the ability of our grants. So the first one's our state 911 grant. And I just want to mention Lieutenant Chris Appalach is our grant administrator, and he works hard to ensure that these grants are put in, the research put in, and hopefully they're approved. We received $231,000 from our state 911 department, and that's used for mandated training for our officers, dispatchers. It's used to staff our dispatch center at times. It pays for our overtime costs when we need a police officer there. And it also pays for Armstrong Ambulance to provide the emergency medical dispatch services that I'm sure Chief Grafton can explain better. But when you call 911 and you have a medical emergency, while the dispatcher is getting it out to the police and fire units, they transfer you to Armstrong, where a professional will walk you through things that you could do to help someone before we get there. That an okay explanation of that? Yeah, okay. We received $155,000 from the Department of Mental Health. That's used to fund our mental health clinician, Danielle Vasson, and she's shared by Stoneham and Melrose. And it also pays for mental health courses and overtime. When we send people out to do these follow-ups to connect with our mental health and overdose patients, it pays to fund that. So that really doesn't come out of our budget. It comes out of the grant money. We received from the EOPS, Executive Office of Public Safety and Security, $36,000 for traffic, bicycle, pedestrian safety, training, enforcement. $9,500 for the installation of electronic citations. So a printer is in every police car now. We're just about to go online with it. They've all been installed, and we're hoping that's going to cut down on the time we have someone stop. So it's, you know, it's safer for the officer. It's less inconvenient for the person being stopped. And it's a direct link to the registry, where on the back end, somebody has to enter all those citations to the registry. Once we get done writing them, now they'll go directly. So it'll save a little bit of work on the back end. We were only one of 13 departments in the state that didn't have it. So I thought that was important that we move forward on that, and we did. And we're almost about to go online. And the big one was the $250,000 we received from EOPS for our body-worn camera program. And that grant money will cover this program for 5 years. It'll pay for all hardware, software, and storage. And I passed one around, the body-worn camera.
Yeah, George won't give it
I
back.
attached it to the
Perfect.
liability purpose.
So again, our officers, you know, we're targeting early spring. We have to do a bunch of training with it. But, you know, that it's just good to point out the training's not covered in that grant. So we have to put folks through, you know, several hours of training in order to go online with this that, that has to come out of the budget that, it's an expensive hit for us, to do that, but we think it's really important. We're gonna ask Erin to wave her wand, and it's something that we just have to get done because it's so important to the community. So, we're trying to work within constraints of budget. Some of our goals for next year, we have 2 positions that are unfilled, that weren't staffed, that were put in our budgets in FY '24 and '25. We have not filled those. Our goal is to hopefully fill them. I think I know it's only 2 bodies, but when you deal with a department that has 42 officers, 2 bodies is a lot. It's a lot because what that means is it could be forced overtime for folks when they want to go home. They can't go home. It's a hit to the budget when we have to pay overtime for people to do that. So we're hoping to fill those positions. We're seeking funding for a deputy police chief. I think we've done the same last year, I think years previous, by Chief McIntyre. And a midnight dispatcher. I'll get back to the deputy chief, but the midnight dispatcher, and this is almost like a combo effort by Chief Grafton and I. So midnight to 8, typically there's 1 dispatcher answering your 911 calls in Stoneham. That's the majority of nights. And from like looking at the operation for a year, that's a hole that we need to fill. We need to have 2 people on the desk. It's a safety issue. It's also like a humanistic issue. So that person sitting there for 8 hours really can't take a break because they're the only ones, they're certified and trained, which you have to be, to answer 911. So even at 3 a.m. to walk around the building to get some fresh air, it can't be done. To use the facilities, they have to call an officer in off the street to sit at the desk for a minute to do that. So that's a position I do think is very critical to the department. I think both departments. And the example is just a few months ago we had a 2-alarm fire on Gould Street. I don't want to steal your thunder because I'm sure the fire department's pictures about that one. And that dispatcher had to run that 2-alarm fire by themselves, and that meant coordinating police efforts, coordinating fire efforts, out-of-town fire efforts, dealing with Eversource, National Grid, all the utility companies. Sorry? Public Works. That's one person doing that, and it's virtually impossible. And I know it doesn't happen a lot, and I know at the beginning of the presentation I said it's quiet in Stoneham, and it is, as it is everywhere. But we got to plan for those emergencies, and we really need that personnel to make sure we're running smooth and safe for everybody. This is just a comparison to our neighbors and how their departments line up, specifically with the deputy chief. Most departments around us do have a deputy chief, and their command structure is a little bit more. I think Danvers is a really good comp for us. They have a lot more upper level people, which leads to more oversight and accountability and responsibility, and hopefully prevents things from happening. To add a deputy chief would be big for the police department. We don't have, when we have to conduct an internal investigation, for example, we don't have anyone. Our IA investigator is from the union, which I have all the faith in the world that they doing the right thing. I don't want to put that message out there, and it's very rare when we have to do it. But I think it can present conflicts at times for investigators when they have to investigate their own union people. So to have a deputy chief, I would charge that person with overseeing our internal affairs, dealing with the post commission, dealing with the training council, dealing with the district attorney's office, handling all building and maintenance and cruiser stuff. That we have a person that does it, that wears multiple hats. So I'm looking to take jobs from people that are wearing multiple hats that need to focus on other jobs first and give them to a deputy chief. And just some of our goals continued. We're continuing to modify our policies, to make new policies, to modify some old policies, to put them in, to have them conform to the Police Officer Standards and Training Commission. We're accelerating our initiative to be certified and accredited by the Mass Police Accreditation Commission. And what that is the Accreditation Commission sets best practices in policing. So, and it's driven through policy. Right, so we're about 35% of the way there. Dave Thistle oversees that. He's done a tremendous job so far. But again, it does take time. It takes accreditation could be anything from building issues. Your building has to be a certain way. Signs have to be a certain spot. To your response to calls has to be a certain way. So there's a lot that goes into it. There are about 330 some odd standards that you have to meet for certification and about 157 for certification. So I anticipate probably 2 years for that process without any additional extra help. I'm sorry. Oh, could you go back one more? Maybe I missed. Accreditation. Oh, yeah. Citizens Police Academy. That's a big one on the list. I think that, like, I'm looking for funding for a Citizens Police Academy, specifically overtime, and that is, I think it's great. It's like an 8-week program. We'll have to write the curriculum. I have a lot of experience with it, but it's a great inside look behind the scenes for people of Stoneham to come in, to tour the building, to sit through classes, to learn all about what we do. The more transparent we can be, the better. To go on some ride-alongs to see what the folks are doing out there. But again, it costs money to do. We need someone to oversee it. We need someone to help write the curriculum. And we have to pay people to come in and teach the classes, our own officers. I think it would be a fantastic thing if we did it annually at the police department. We've increased another goal that we've done. We've increased our presence online. I hope you're all connected to us on Facebook. Everybody listening at home. I think this time last year we had 600 people. We're just under 2,000 right now, which is awesome. And we want to monitor that organizational change that we made with the new division, and certainly make adjustments when necessary to it. And some of our highlighted budget requests for next year would be the deputy chief and the dispatcher that I spoke about. We're hoping to continue to increase our overtime budget to mirror actual expenditures, and we have seen increases over the years, so we're hoping just to continue those increases. We're asking for more money for body armor. We have every 5 years we have to replace body armor for our officers, and it costs about $1,200 per officer. So everyone's on a different schedule, but when we onboard new people, like the 7 we just did, we have to pay for body armor. And then two marked police vehicles we're looking for. We're respectfully requesting money for. Again, that's just to keep our fleet up to date. And the next one is I think I asked for it last year, was a police motorcycle. It's I think the $30,000 request. There's a lot of value in that request. I don't want to spend too much time on the motorcycle, but if from a community policing standpoint, I think everybody loves a police officer on a motorcycle. They're attracted to them. They want to see the bike. The uniform looks great. But I envision the bike being at Redstone, being at the high school, being at the school for the kids, being on the Tri-Community Greenway, being all over the place. And it also aids us in getting places where cruisers can't. But the other thing from a chief of police standpoint is it's really important for me to think of things that are going to retain our officers. Stoneham's a smaller police department, and it's important to have things to keep people going. With the new civil service law that passed, I'm sure I don't know if anyone's aware, but officers don't need permission to transfer anymore. So they're essentially free agents, right? Before, in order to transfer department to department, a police officer would need permission from both appointing authorities, from both town administrators or mayors would have to sign off on that. And we would take things into account. And my recommendation would be to Dennis that, we're shorthanded, we really can't let them go, or we can. Now we don't need that. So I really believe it's incumbent upon me to create things that are going to keep our people here, because we have great people, great officers doing great things, and we want to retain them. For $30,000, there's a lot of value in that on many fronts. Cruiser repairs, our police cars are used 24 hours a day. Brett and his team do a fantastic job keeping our people going with our police cars. But there are some things that, they can't fix. And if we think about it, the police car is someone's office. It's like your office at home, except it's just open 24 hours a day. The seats need to be replaced. The radio, the police radios get broken. The lights get broken. We don't account for that in our budget, and we've seen over the last few years that it's really significant, and it takes away from other things we could be doing. So it's a small ask, $10,000 for cruiser repairs. Cruisers are good for about 5 years, plus or minus. We get about 80 to 100,000 on them, maybe a little bit under, but The next one is $12,500 for a police evidence room audit. We conducted this last year. So for accreditation standards, we have to audit our evidence room once a year. And what does that mean? It means every single piece of evidence has to be touched, looked at, gone through to ensure accuracy, to ensure it's in the right place, to ensure what's on the bag says it's in the bag. So we have to do that once a year. We just went through a big process last year. It took a week. And I'm super happy to report everything is where it's supposed to be. The only thing in that report was just some recommendations of streamlining a process, bringing it up to 2025 standards. That's really all that was in there. So that's a testament to Chris Copen, who oversees our evidence room, and our detective division, who also plays a big part in that. But that's a really important item for a police department, the integrity of our evidence. And we need to do that once a year, and again, it is a cost, unfortunately. Our rental range, $2,000 for our rental range. That's our firearms. Our current range, we have a range in the basement of the police station. It's not capable of accepting training for our rifles, for our AR-15s that we have in the cruisers in case of emergency. It's just not up to standards. To repair that, that was a capital request by us to repair it. It's significant. So we have to rent a range in Reading. We go there for a couple days. And almost $6,500 for police academy tuition, and then $11,000 for uniforms. Uniforms cost a lot of money. And unfortunately, the recruits don't wear the same uniforms that they wear on the street. They're different colors. So we have to buy multiple sets of uniforms. And the $6,500 is for the recruits going to the academy that we anticipate, those FY 24 and 25 positions. The next slide, just 2 quick slides. These are just pictures of like awesome events that our officers were out there doing. It's our movie night. It's our coffee with a cop at Target, and probably our what do you call it? National Night Out. I'm sorry, a national night out. So we have an expert in candy. What do you call it?
They get 6%.
But again, yeah, yes. But again, like these cost money to be able to do this. We love doing it for the community, but again, there's a cost to it. And I think everyone is now familiar. We created our honor guard. They were awesome at Fenway Park. If those that saw them for our Thanksgiving Day game, they look much better than the Reading Police Department. And they train once a month. They're super professional. I think we kind of debuted them last Memorial Day. But again, we did 9 events last year. Cost $6,000, not accounted for in the budget. So these are why we're asking for these increases, to have all this awesome stuff to be able to provide for the town, and those are why we're asking for those increases. But thank you for your time, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Chief. I'm going to start, and this is going to be a question for Brent and Matt as well. What is the ideal number for your police department?
Staffing-wise?
Staffing.
The ideal number for us would be top to bottom 44. We're at 42. So if we were able to fill those 2 positions, the FY 24 and 25 that we were budgeted for, we would be where we need to be. With that said, it takes a year to get a police officer hired, trained, and out on the street on their own. So I'm not taking into account, anticipated other things that could come up, but 44 is a number.
So, as you know, we've done a hiring freeze, so we're not filling positions knowing the predicament we're in. So that restores what our ambitions were in previous fiscal years. That number does not include positions that we've talked about before, which is things like a second SRO, the deputy chief, like a 9 to 5 shift for like CIT, mental health. We have a supervisor who helps with the CIT, but someone who's going with sort of our co-responders. And there've been a couple others that we've talked about, additional sergeants or supervisors on overnight shifts. So
So again, my question is, what would be the ideal, like 50? is what you're saying.
Oh, that would be wonderful. I'm done, thanks, have a nice night.
Deal.
Deal, done. But, you know,
So
look, we
yeah.
know what's realistic and what's not, and we're very cognizant of that. And we do appreciate all the time you folks are putting into thinking about our budget and what Dennis has worked hand in hand with us on the budget. We really appreciate it, and we know they're trying times. We absolutely know that, but I think, 50 is great, 44 would be wonderful.
So just for the people who can't see on the screen, a town like Melrose, which is very comfortable, has 50 officers. Saugus is 68, Danvers is 47, Wakefield 47, Winchester's 40, Reading's 46, Wilming's 52, and North Reading, which is a population of 15,000, has 32. So, like many other departments across town, the police department has gone without year after year after year, and the lower number you're seeing, and we might see even a lower number next year, is reflective of what they've gone without for, and this board and the school committee and the finance advisory board have all been supportive of the times we've tried to add bodies over the last couple of years. So, I think the department as a whole recognizes that. I think there's also recognition of the situation we're in as well.
I just want to add, you know, we've talked about, and I think this is really important as we think about what does an override fund? You know, when we talk about what does this town need, I don't want to just say we stay at 44. We've talked about where do we really need to be?
I agree.
What holes have we been papering over? If we need to be at 50 or 48, or you said Danvers is a good option. Well, I noticed Danvers has 3 extra positions. They're at 47. They've got basically 3 extra command staff, an extra deputy, and a couple of captains that look like they're over and above what we have. You know, you talked about some mental health positions that we don't have. If that's what Stoneham really would want and should have, then that should be on the list. We should be trying to fund that when we do an override. You know, and I think part of the challenge with the way that the budget for town departments gets done versus the schools is the schools, just because of the way it works, really publicly has to have this painful 12 stages of grief process of here's what I want and oh, I'm not getting it. Whereas you go through that with Dennis between you all as department heads go through that. And
I already told him he's not getting anything on any of these slides.
And that is honestly, that's your role. And that is honestly, that's the school committee's role, is to do that publicly. And, you know, it's just a different process with the town departments. But the town needs to know that you've gone through that process of being we're being realistic. Well, maybe the town wants more of your blue sky. I really wish I could have X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And I will say this, you know, it applies to the rest of these departments here. This is the opportunity to say what should we really be trying to buy ourselves up to. If we want to have, you know, an additional mental health person, an additional management staff member, so that we can have some additional accountability, and have people not having 50 hats on, now is the time to make that change. And so that's why it's good to hear. It's good to hear what you need so we can try to actually get it done. Because maybe the window is now.
There you go.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Nicely said. Nicely said.
I wanted to boo him.
Does anybody have any questions for the chief?
I do.
George?
So, you bringing up the numbers and stuff, and you brought up the forcing of the overtimes and
Yes.
whatnot. The morale a few years ago was pretty bad because you were losing officers
Right.
and you couldn't hire them in fast enough to get them out of the academy and stuff. And what Tim just said, Ramey, about the staffing number, ultimately, so you don't burn out
The good.
the good.
High performers.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because that's what we're afraid of, is losing
Yeah.
the good. And now it seems like you have a really solid department, and you want to bring in things. Bringing in things is one thing, and I get what Dennis has to say is no to a lot, but having more staff so you don't burn them out with the
Right.
forcing of the overtime
Yeah.
is, I think, way more important than the bells and whistle. Not to be a jerk, but I think,
Yeah, you're right.
I think honestly, that's gonna be how you save these guys, because no one wants to get forced.
No.
Especially if you have something planned and whatnot.
Yeah.
And I know there's a force list and everything
Yep.
else, but it just really, it burns them out.
So we're on a great trajectory with that, but we want to keep it going. We don't want to fall back to where we were, like you just said, right? So I think it's important, like you said, to plan for that, and I agree with you. The backbone of the police department is our patrol division.
Yeah.
The people out there answering the calls, and when you're working and have to stay an extra 8 hours or 16 hours, it burns you out.
So we can just be honest about that story, is that when we run low at 44 or 42, and we have 5 or 6 people leave the department all at once, it takes a year to hire an officer to go through training. And so the number, when you see it, these comparisons at 47, there were periods of times when we were in the 30s or the low 30s, and we still have shifts that have to be covered and maintained. And as I've said publicly, even at his swearing in, is that department, saved the town essentially by supporting each other and carrying us through. But when you run low and then something happens and you have sort of, even with the civil service law, there's additional risk.
Right. I mean, even right now, we're talking, for us, like, we're putting people in the academy, but, that's really, 42 is not a true number of what's over here now. Minus 10 for supervisors on that. Now you're down to 32, and then you minus the 4 people going to the academy, we're in the 20s, right? 28. So, yeah, it's a problem right now. It is a problem. And again, we have to plan a year in advance when we hire someone, and that's what we're trying to make up for that now. But there should be a lot of credit for those people that work out in the street every night and that are getting forced to work. It's hard. And it's no different than the fire department. It's trying times. But right now, we're talking the 20s. Like, that's what we're talking right now. So that 42 is really not a real number. That's
So you need 75.
but
You're a
the
bad
one thing I do
negotiator.
want to say, and I think it's really important to say, is I don't want to scare people that when 911 is called, we're gonna be there. I promise you, we're gonna be there. If I gotta get in a police car myself, we're gonna be there. That's not the case. Patrol will always come first. We will figure it out. But it is challenging, George, like you said, and I appreciate you saying it. It is for those people, but I just don't want to get the message to the community that, 911 will always be picked up. That would be our first and foremost priority in the police department before other else. Other things may take a back seat. There may be some investigations we won't be able to complete. There may be community events we can't, but 911 will always, always, always be answered. But thank you.
Thanks, Chief. Yeah.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Chief. No other questions?
Yeah, well, actually, it's probably more for you, Dennis, because one of the other things that I found very striking in your requests was that a lot of them are things that you are doing today, but they don't live in the budget anywhere.
Right.
So it's one of those examples of where somehow we always do more with less, right? And it's never really reflected. So my question for you, Dennis, is every department doing something similar to what Chief has done here, where they're looking at, these are the things that somehow we've just taken for granted and somehow found a way to accomplish that we should be building into their budgets moving forward?
Overtime for all these departments is always a hard one, to budget for, because we can't always fully reflect it. But it is also one that we're able to either adjust going through the year or work with other means, like going to the Finance Advisory Board or town meeting to sort of rectify it. The other one is obviously snow and ice, where we,
Yes, no.
by default, underfund it because we know we're allowed to overexpend it. There's always sort of this group of items that are small, like 10, 12, 15,000, that maybe we can't always anticipate, but we do sort of manage to make it through the budget process and the
But when
end of the
every
fiscal year.
department is doing that, right? When they've got 5 things that are 10, 15 grand, and every department is doing the same thing, that's where the death of 1,000 paper cuts, like we've talked before. And that's why we continually have to cut, because we haven't figured all of those into the true bottom line number of what we want for Stoneham to be the town that we want it to be. And I think that that's part of what we need to, we hear people that come and do their public comment of what are we getting for that money? I think that is a big piece of it. It isn't just this is what the FY26 budget is for each department. It's where do we need to be to really be able to support all of our residents. This is a good example, and I feel like every department should do a similar activity.
I agree. I think, when we talk about the override, it is for operational and budgets, right? So that's what we're looking at, when we have these conversations.
So I would just kind of comment on Heidi's point. The fundamental, there's a couple structural issues happening, but a lot of the things that we've seen over the last couple of years is how the costs have gone up for things like body armor, like air tanks for the fire department, like fire trucks and police cars, when they've gone up 30%, and we're trying to maintain the 2.5. So, 2 or 3 years ago, where we were managing a tight budget, there was, there was a glimpse of breathing room. So this ability to make it work is getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah, I mean, you can see it right here.
I just want to add, I'm a little nervous the amount of our mental health budget that is on grant money. I love bringing in the grant money, and I think, obviously, if we bring it in, we're going to spend it on those services. But I think there needs to be a core set of funding that lives within our budget. To the point of lots of things are not in the budget. What I don't like is the idea that everything goes away. And I don't know. I can't tell how much lives within the budget, but I think there's a lot of it that doesn't. And I get nervous about this idea that so much of our service might go away if that grant ends. And I don't know when that grant ends. And I'd rather know we have a core, this is what we would keep, and this is what we would always be able to support within our budget for mental health services within the police department. And then the grant does this extra on top of it. And we would, obviously not be happy if that went away, but we'd be okay. And I'd rather grants be kind of that way. I'd rather them not be supporting the sort of core. I'd rather them be supporting
The
the sort of the
backup,
extra,
right.
the backup, whatever
Yep,
that would be,
yep.
exactly.
Good point. All right, Chief, you're off the hook.
Thank you. Thank you very
All
much.
right, this was only his second time, so for how long he went will be better next year.
Can I have my camera back?
Yeah.
Nice job, Chief. Nice job,
Yeah,
Aaron.
thanks, Aaron.